After Mojtaba's forces reportedly hit Israel, is another key U.S. ally now facing an Iranian-linked strike scare that could widen this volatile conflict far beyond its current fronts? When air raid sirens suddenly screamed across parts of Saudi Arabia, did a wave of panic sweep the Gulf as questions exploded over what exactly had triggered this latest missile mystery? As rumors swirled of a direct hit, is the Saudi military now racing to assure the world that Prince Sultan Air Base was never struck at all, despite those dramatic sirens echoing across the night? With Riyadh blaming a missing Yemeni missile for the alerts, does this unexplained disappearance near the Al-Kharj border raise more questions than it answers about who is targeting whom? From a nerve-rattling Saudi scare to open Israel-Iran exchanges of fire, is West Asia now edging toward an abyss where one miscalculation could drag the entire region into all-out war? Saudi Arabia flatly denies that Prince Sultan Air Base was ever hit in a missile attack, leaving viewers to wonder whether this was a false alarm, a fog of war mix-up, or something more sensitive. Defense spokesman Turki al-Maliki insists the air raid sirens in Al-Kharj were purely precautionary, raising the question of what threat commanders feared enough to sound alarms without a confirmed strike. Al-Maliki says a missile launched from Yemen simply vanished from radar near the border, and did that disappearance alone trigger the alerts, or was Saudi intelligence bracing for a far bigger hit?
Saudi Arabia's defense ministry later stated on X that the ballistic missile had deviated from its course, suggesting the projectile veered away from its intended path before impact.
Officials add that the missile ultimately fell harmlessly in an open area near the Saudi-Yemeni border. Yet does this near-miss highlight just how close the kingdom stands to becoming a direct battlefield?
Iran has said it did not launch any attack on Saudi Arabia, according to a report cited by Al Jazeera, denying any involvement in recent strikes.
At the same time, Iran-aligned Houthi rebels boast that they launched a fresh attack on Israel, raising the stakes by turning Yemen's battlefields into yet another launching pad in this regional showdown. All this unfolds just hours after Israel and Iran traded direct fire in the early hours of June 8, prompting the question of whether the conflict is morphing from shadow war to open state-on-state confrontation.
Explosions echoed over central Israel as air defense batteries lit up the night sky, intercepting incoming Iranian missiles and drones aimed at military targets.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it struck 2 Israeli bases in direct response to IDF attacks on 3 Iranian radar sites, setting up a tit-for-tat cycle that could spiral if neither side steps back. The IRGC frames its missile strike as payback for Israeli hits on Beirut on June 7. But does this widening chain of retaliation risk pulling Lebanon, Yemen, Iran, and Israel into one interconnected war?
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, the aggressive Zionist regime, by repeatedly violating the ceasefire and with a green light in support of the criminal United States and the silence of international bodies, has increased its wickedness against the oppressed people of Lebanon day by day, committing war crimes by using prohibited weapons, including phosphorus bombs. Despite previous warnings from the Islamic Republic of Iran, the child-killing Zionist regime, having crossed all red lines and increased its attacks in southern Lebanon, has targeted Beirut's Dahir. We had warned that if the crimes in Beirut's Dahir expand, we would attack targets within the occupied territories. The Zionist army must stop its attacks on southern Lebanon and Dahir. Should it expand its attacks on that region or respond to Iran's action, it will face even more crushing and regrettable blows, and devastating attacks will be launched against the regime and its supporters. Victory is only from God, the Almighty, the wise.
Amid the spiraling strikes and counterstrikes, Trump publicly urges Israel and Iran to stop shooting immediately. But can a social media plea really cool tempers when rockets are already airborne? He insists that despite what he calls ignorant and stupid attacks, both sides are still engaged in peace talks, leaving viewers to ask how real those talks are when the battlefield keeps lighting up. Shortly after Trump's message, Iran announces a cessation of operations by the armed forces. But is this a genuine pause or simply a tactical timeout while Tehran gauges Israel's next move? Tehran claims its forces have already delivered a painful response to Israel, raising the question of whether this is the end of the round, or just a warning shot before a harsher blow if fighting resume.
Katamalunbia's central headquarters announced, following the acts of aggression and hostility carried out by the bloodthirsty Zionist regime in southern Lebanon and the Dahia area, with the support of criminal America, the powerful armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran delivered a painful response to this regime in support of the oppressed people of Lebanon, a response from which the illegitimate Zionist regime and its supporters should have learned a lesson. Accordingly, the cessation of operations by the armed forces is hereby announced. However, it is emphasized that should the aggression and hostile acts continue, including in southern Lebanon, much more severe and crushing measures than before will follow.
On June 8, Yemen's Houthis claim they launched a fresh missile attack on central Israel, prompting fears that Iran's network of proxies is now fully activated in support of Tehran's confrontation. The group claimed its projectiles had struck what it called sensitive enemy targets in Jaffa, presenting the strike as a direct blow against Israel's heartland. The Iranian-backed movement vows to block any Israeli ship from sailing through the Red Sea, threatening to turn a vital global trade artery into a pressure point in the Israel-Iran showdown. "We will prevent Zionist ships from passing through Bab al-Mandab Strait," the Houthis declare, raising the stakes for international shipping and testing how far the world will tolerate this maritime squeeze.
In line with confronting the American and Zionist aggression against the axis of jihad and resistance in Iran, Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, and in rejection of the Zionist project seeking to establish what is so-called Greater Israel under the name of the New Middle East, and in our endeavor to break the unjust and oppressive siege imposed by the American enemy on our people and the free and dear peoples of the Axis in Lebanon, Gaza, and Iran, and based on the principle of unified fronts and confronting enemies, and in response to the Zionist aggression against Lebanon, Iran, and Gaza, the Yemeni armed forces launched a missile barrage targeting sensitive Israeli enemy targets in the occupied Jaffa region. The missile strikes achieved their objectives with precision. And in this context, the armed forces affirm the following. First, we declare a complete and total ban on Israeli maritime navigation in the Red Sea, and we consider all enemy movements to be legitimate military targets for our armed forces from the moment this statement is issued. Second, we affirm that we will respond to escalation with escalation, and our military operations will intensify in accordance to the field developments, the battle, and in conjunction with the axis of jihad and resistance. Third, we affirm the right of our people and the peoples of our free nation to confront the American-Israeli aggression. We will not stand idly by in the face of the unjust siege imposed on our people and the peoples of the axis of jihad and resistance in Palestine, Gaza, Iran, Lebanon, and Iraq. All the enemy's attempt will fail, Allah willing, and our operations will continue as long as the aggression and siege against us and the axis of jihad and resistance persist.
Hebrew media reported that Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu held a phone call as the West Asia crisis escalated, adding a new political layer to the already volatile military showdown. Those same reports say the call came before Iran announced it would halt attacks, fueling speculation that Washington's private diplomacy may have nudged both sides toward a fragile pause. Later, an Israeli official tells local media that Israel has decided to pause strikes on Iran, raising the question of whether this is a tactical pause or the start of a broader de-escalation. However, Israel makes clear that operations against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon will continue, signaling that even if the Iran front cools, the northern theater remains very much active. This flare-up lands on the 100th day since the war began with February 28 airstrikes, underlining how a conflict meant to be contained has instead dragged on and spread across multiple borders. A UN-backed ceasefire in April largely halted direct Iran-Israel hits, yet left deep tensions smoldering beneath the surface, waiting for just one trigger to reignite the cross-border confrontation. Now, this latest strike and counterstrike have shattered that fragile lull, raising fresh fears that the region is sliding back toward full-scale war unless the current pause hardens into something more durable.